Good afternoon, everybody. This is our second in a series of six lead generation supercharged webinars that we're offering here at BusyWeb. My name is Trigby. I'll be your host today. We're going to be talking today about how to create and understand your buyer's journey. What is the journey that your buyer takes from first stage to last stage, and what can you do to affect it positively on the marketing front? If you're not familiar with us, we are a full-service digital marketing agency. We are based here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We are really responsible for just about anything under the sun as it relates to the digital experience of your company. So we can build your website, we can change your website to get more leads, grow your social presence, write new content, write ebooks, write blogs, garner more leads, optimize your content, and do really anything as it relates to marketing your business. We are a team of about 15 people. We've been in business for close to 20 years, and we are a HubSpot agency partner, and we're also a certified Google partner. So today, again, like I said, this is part 2 in a series. Last week, Dave talked about building personas for targeting and what it looks like to create a persona of your ultimate buyer. Today, I'm going to be talking about creating your buyer's journey. Next week, Dave will be back with creating landing pages and forms and so on. So it's a 6-part series. If you hadn't had the opportunity to listen to Dave's personas webinar that he did last week, I'd encourage you to do so, because it really, this and that are 2 basic foundations for everything that we're going to do that grow going from here moving forward. So if you have the opportunity, it's definitely worth the investment to check it out. It's about a 40-minute process, but it really helps you create the foundation to build from here. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about review a little of personas and what exactly they mean and how that starts that foundation. Then we're going to be talking about the buyer's journey. I'm going to actually map out each part of the buyer's journey and talk about some of the things that you might want to think of. And then lastly, how to execute that and how that translates into actual marketing activities. So I'm excited to be here with you. I'm excited that you're along with me for the journey. So let's go ahead and get started. So as means of review and housekeeping, we wanted to spend a little time going over buyer personas. And obviously, Dave went through this in much more detail. But the purpose of a buyer persona is to give you an actual person to talk to as you're creating all of the different marketing tactics that we'll go into in later stages. So a buyer persona is a representation of what your ideal buyer might be. It's some educated guesses about who they are, what influences them, what excites them, what are their goals, what are their frustrations, what are their fears. All of those go into that. What they aren't, however, they're not a list of your target market. They're not a specific job title that you're trying to target or a specific person. And they are dependent on specific tools or technologies. So you want to make sure that you do include why they are interested in using your services. So obviously somebody who has no interest in what you're doing isn't really a good fit. So that's a quick version of what a buyer persona is, and that kind of answers the who question. Now we're going to answer the what question today. So of where we go from there. So ultimately, as we wrap up the buyer's persona idea, really what we're trying to do is understand who we're trying to reach, and we're trying to speak their language. So we're trying to hone down talking to everybody to only talking to those people that we really want to have listen. And the way we do that is by taking them through the buyer's journey. This looks very complicated and very difficult. There are a lot of outpoints throughout this, but don't worry. I'm going to take you through each part of this and explain in detail what each part means and where it takes you. So what exactly is the buyer's journey? It answers a couple of different questions. Number one, it answers what is the path that your customer takes when working with you, from not knowing you at all to becoming a raving fan. How exactly does that happen? What sort of tools do you use to engage them to the extent that they are, when they are ready and willing to listen, they are ready and willing to listen to you? And lastly, we're going to talk about how does your marketing support each step in the process and how can you be a more effective marketer? So let's start with the first. Let's start with the basic first concept, which is what really is the buyer's journey. Again, that's the journey that your buyers take from you, start to finish. There are 3 stages in the pre-sale, meaning something that's happened before you actually sell them anything, and that's those 3 stages are awareness, consideration, and decision making. So by providing value and answers at every single stage, you're able to nurture customers towards making a decision. And if you do it right, the decision to buy from you. So the goal is to avoid mistakes of more traditional approaches like waiting until they're ready or even delivering a really hard sales pitch. So instead, what you really get to do is give them exactly what they need according to their particular stage and help them move in your direction. So what the goal for your sales team is, you're going to supply them with a lead that has been expertly guided rather than forcing your prospect's hand to build trust. So we all know that trust has a tremendous influences on today's purchasers. And so we want to create that in our leads. So I have a little abstract thing to share with you here that kind of gets you the idea of what these 3 stages are. So the first stage, awareness. That's the equivalent of saying, I feel sick. I have a problem, and I'm not acknowledged that I do have a problem. Second is the consideration stage. Well, what does my problem entail? When I say I feel bad, what's the next thing? How do I feel bad? Do I have strep throat? Do I have shivers? Do I have a fever? What are the things that I actually need to be solved? And then what are my options to have them solved? Then you get into stage 3, which is the decision stage. You can go see your primary care physician. You can go to the ER. You can stay home and have chicken soup. You're making a decision as to how you are going to solve the problem. Sales is the same way. Sometimes your prospects don't know that they have a problem until you explain it to them. Then they're going to evaluate whether or not you're going to solve their problem, and then they're going to choose whether or not you will solve their problem. So let's break this down into each individual stage. The first stage is the awareness stage. So during the awareness stage, buyers identify their challenge or their opportunity that they want to pursue. I feel sick. They also decide whether or not the goal or challenge should be a priority. The challenge is oftentimes the buyer and the person who approaches you might not be the decision maker. So the third category here in prioritization is whether or not the person who you're dealing with is the person who is creating the priority. So in order to fully understand the awareness stage for your buyer, here's some things you want to ask yourself and ask your buyers. Number 1, how do buyers describe their goals or challenges? I want to make more money this year. Okay, great. What exactly does more mean to you? How much more? How much are you making now? Second, how do buyers educate themselves on these goals or challenges? Well, if I want to get more leads in order to grow my business, how do I do that? What are the different scenarios in which I could do that would make the most sense for my business? Third, and this is a really key thing, so if you're taking notes, this is what I'd encourage you to write down. What are the consequences of inaction by the buyer? If you have this goal and if you have this problem and you do nothing, what happens then? So next, are there common misconceptions buyers have about addressing the goal or challenge? One of the things that we experience here at BusyWeb all the time is people think that a particular avenue of marketing is a silver bullet. If you just do social media the right way, then all your dreams will come true and all the money in the world will rain down upon you. That's not actually true. That's a misconception that we have to combat every time we work with somebody. Next, how do buyers decide whether the goal or challenge should be prioritized? So in all the things that we have to do, this kind of gets into the tail end of the question I asked prior. How do they decide what's the most priority? Because if you're like me, you have 12 things that are a priority that you have to get done today, and it's up to you to decide which one to do. And finally, the most important question, what happens if they don't solve the problem at all? These are the kind of questions that you really want to be asking your buyer in the awareness stage. So what are some of the goals that you should focus on as a marketer during the awareness stage? Well, number one, acquiring new visitors. So you want your company's stability and growth to be dependent on reaching new people. So you really just want to let people know that your company exists. And then if you're lucky, they'll take some interest. Next, you want to segment some new visitors. So by point of origin, basically meaning how did they get there, or well, any other sort of demographic information to start getting a baseline of who is coming to you and what do they look like, what are their interests. That sort of tails into the buyer's persona that we talked about earlier. And third, how do you improve your brand's visibility and brand perception in a favorable direction? So in this day and age, your customer is building a brand just as much as you are. So as a marketer, your job at this stage is to create awareness of your product or your service so your buyers begin to understand what you do and how you can help them. So if you're creating content, it really needs to be focused on your buyers' pain points, not just on your product or your brand. So next, the second is the consideration stage. I have a cold. What can I do about it? So in the consideration stage, buyers have clearly identified the goal or challenge that they have, and then they're committed to trying to address it. So that what they're doing during this process in this stage is evaluating the different approaches available to solve the challenge. So some of the questions that you want to ask yourself during this time is, what categories of solutions do buyers investigate? How do buyers educate themselves? How do buyers perceive the pros and cons of each category? How do buyers decide which category is right for them that they need to prioritize? So a great thing to do to make this a reality is to use a marketing automation tool. The value in that is it can help you track content downloads and collect prospect information. So you're not ready to be selling yet. You're going to be starting to sell sort of at the tail end of this process, but you can start gathering interest into prospects' preferences. The key here is educational content is crucial. Lay off heavy sales pitches. This is all about building trust with your prospect and establishing your company as a credible solution. Okay, step 3 is the decision stage. So in the decision stage, buyers have already decided on a solution category. So for example, they could write a pro or con list of specific offerings and then decide on the one that best meets their needs. So questions that you should ask yourself to help you define your decision stage are, number one, again, what criteria are your buyers using to evaluate your offerings? 2, when buyers investigate your company's offering, what do they like about it and what do they not like compared to their alternatives? 3rd, what concerns do they have with your offering? So what are sort of the frequently asked objections that you get on a regular basis? Who needs to be involved in the decision? For each person involved, how does their perspective on the decision differ? Next, do buyers have expectations around trying the offering before they purchase it? You're not going to buy a car that you've never driven before. Outside of purchasing, do buyers need to make additional preparation? So do you have a product or service that needs to be implemented, that needs to be nurtured, that needs to have somebody check in on it? So as your buyers begin to self-identify in the second stage, sales reps like me like to use that information using marketing automation to tailor their conversations to each individual buyer. So in my case, I've got a good 8 or 10 different things that I can offer a potential prospect, but as a good salesperson, I'm not going to try and persuade them into a solution that doesn't make any sense for them or doesn't actually solve their problem. The goal here is we want to speak the language of the C-suite. So those people who are in the high tower and those people who are focused on one of 3 things. They're focused on making money, they're focused on saving money, or 3rd, having their people have a different relationship with time. So when you're talking about these in the closing parts of the decision process is you want to be talking about how this will increase your revenue, how this will save money, how this will create a great return on investment, and so forth. A couple of goals to keep in mind during this process is you want to maximize your funnel conversions. So you're filling your funnel, so you don't want your leads to stop moving through it. So take advantage of each lead that's made it this far, convert as many as possible. If you're not converting a lot, then that means you've either got a problem with your leads or the people who are doing the conversions. Second, you want to convert leads into customers. So the goal of everything you've been doing up to this point is to convert prospects to leads. Now what you want to do is leverage the trust that you've earned, that you've working so hard over the last 2 stages, and make the sale. So that's the third, that's the decision stage. That's really the everything up to the sale. Now, the 4th stage, which isn't talked about very frequently, is the retention stage, where your customer will say, I immediately regret my choice. Your customer will almost immediately begin to have some sort of buyer's remorse. They'll be asking themselves the kind of questions like, will this solution I picked really work? Do these people really know what they're doing? What happens if it doesn't work? How will this affect me personally if it doesn't work? What if it's hard? What if it's frustrating? So remember, the content that you create isn't just for prospects. So one of the great things you might want to do is create a drip campaign with frequent issues that buyers have when they're onboarding, like advanced features, tips for using your product or service more effectively. So if you continue to show them the value from the product and the solution actually works in the way that they wanted to begin with, they're much more likely to retain when renewal comes around. So a couple of goals to keep in mind during this process. Number one, your most important goal is to turn your customers into repeat customers. So you've got products or services to sell, right? Do everything in your power to make an existing customer into a repeat customer. It's a lot easier than trying to close a new lead. Next, you want to maintain customer value. So your existing customers should be treated like the gold mine that they are. Give them discounts, special offers to existing customers, and show them how important they are to your business. Third, as much as you can, reduce customer churn. So you've worked hard to make that sale. You've worked hard to make that person a customer. Do your best to keep them happy and from falling off the face of the planet after a single interaction. So lastly, push your company's branding initiatives. Always be working to improve the way your brand is viewed by your customers and potential customers. So now that you've made the sale, get those people sharing their opinions on social media or leaving reviews that helps influence future leads. So stage 5 is the stage that everybody hopes for. Everything's gone to plan at this point, and buyers are happy with where they've ended up at the end of their journey. Their product or service is working effectively, and they're now ready to become a valuable marketing resource. Another way to put this is creating customer evangelists, those people who can speak positively about the experience they've had with you, and they're a powerful resource and what you should work hard to cultivate. A couple of things to keep in mind here is, number one, how can you promote the relationships that you have with these existing businesses and these advocates to upsell them and to promote their business? Because by promoting the success you've had with their business, it will then in turn demonstrate to other people how successful you could be for them. Second, focus on their solution. You've created a great solution. It might be a little custom just for them. Use that to show how flexible you are and how you're ready to sell again. So this buyer's journey that we talked about actually circles on itself, and the effective use of the end of the buyer's journey in those stage 4s and 5s will start influencing stage 1 and 2s for the next sale. So here's the entire journey put back together. As you can see, there's a ton of different places that marketing supports the sales journey. And sometimes the journey is extensive into the months, and in the best cases into years. So even in the best case scenario, the customer is going to make a lot of their decisions and evaluations well before any of your salespeople get a chance to talk to them. As a salesperson myself, that makes the job even harder. What makes the job easier is when I know what my prospects have done, what pieces they've interacted with, and how they've interacted with them, so I can tailor the solution offerings that I make each time I start a new conversation. So you'll notice that a lot of the tools on screen here have repeats, like email, like reviews, like social, and blogs. That's where knowing the buyer's persona really comes back into play. Knowing who your customer is changes depending on whether or not they've already bought from you. None of these tools are static by any means, and neither is your persona. So you should have several different personas for different points in your journey. So let's go over the inbound toolkit. This is the second point in our journey here today. all of the different things that you have at your disposal to try and create a great customer journey. The awareness stage, we're looking at things like public relations, things like word of mouth, even on social or even an online ad. Next, things like in the consideration stage, we're looking at email marketing, newsletters, promotions, pay-per-click ads, social media, review sites, reading your blog, seeing opportunities about you in the news. On the purchase side, really that's going to be a fixed closing point where you're going to focus on the money, focus on how you're improving or saving them money, and you're giving them a great experience that's not frustrating. On the retention side, the two tools that you have at your disposal are things like a frequently asked questions database and also a knowledge base that you can direct people to. One of the things we do here at BusyWeb is everyone who hosts with us, we have a video library of everything that you would need to do to run your website effectively. We have a how-to video on how to do that. Finally, the advocacy group, that focuses on things like promotions, blogs, newsletters. Again, like I said, it circles around on itself. So once people are hitting that stage and they're advocating for you, you want to truly give them the opportunity to do so by promoting their business and promoting your success story as a result. So here's the entire journey broken down into groups. And as you can see, there are a lot of different tools here, and it might be a little overwhelming, but I want to remind you that this is a great opportunity to review your buyer's persona. All of this becomes entirely more easy if you think about it in terms of the one person that you are trying to work with, your persona. So that persona is the person that you're taking through this journey. So your job as a marketer then involves talking to that person and using these different tools just by talking to them. How their needs change throughout the process and what their wants change throughout the process makes this a lot easier. So the trick, though, is all of these tools do have to be in sync. They do all have to be telling the same stories and the same style of stories. So how does this work in real life? I wanted to present you with a sale group and show you how this actually works by giving you an animated version of this. So this is the buyer's journey for an IT firm. So the first step is awareness, and their client realizes that they need more support. Either they've outgrown their existing technology infrastructure, they're looking to switch to a more cost-effective provider, or they just really need a good right partner. Some way, again, they've said, I feel sick, I need help. Next is the consideration phase, where they're doing their research. They're going to look at websites. They're going to look at calls to action. They're going to look at things like data sheets, like webinars, like ebooks. How do you present content about the solutions that you could offer? Third, the purchase. The purchase is when they're really going to say, what is it going to take to get this done? How can you solve my problem? How much is it going to cost? Where do we take it from there? Is it a right fit? And if it is a right fit, then you go into stages 4 and 5. So again, on that purchase phase, what are the things that are going to be the most helpful? Things like a return on investment calculator, case studies of people who have had similar experiences to them, and even some technical product demos to show how easy it is to experience with them. So you can see here, as we diagram this out, it seems very complicated. And the reason is your prospect is going to take whatever journey they want to get to the end point. And your goal as a marketer and as a salesperson is to allow them to do that and earn trust along the way, so that when you get to the point of starting to talk to them, you will have already established a certain amount of trust in that you can solve their particular problem. So I wanted to present this as well. This is a way to map some content choices to the journey that you're going to be doing. Things like awareness, really, what are the things that you can offer? And I'll have this available as a handout if after you see this, you want to take a look at this again in more detail. But really, what is the goal, that what you're trying to do? By and large, really what you're trying to do is start to have a small little exchange of information. So if I present you with an ebook, will you give me your contact information? Okay, great. Thank you. How did you like that ebook? Please reach out to me and let's schedule a time to talk together. Again, we're trying to imprint small amounts of yeses so that once we get to the big ask by our sales team, who are going to ask, will you let us do this if you give us a pile of money? The answer is going to be a much easier yes than if they don't know and they don't have some trust in you. So I broke this down a little easier, and I put this actually in the context of each one of the buyer's journey stages. So in the awareness stage, really what you need to be focused on is what exactly is the customer caring about at that point? The answer is they're caring about themselves. And where do they seek solutions like yours? That's where you need to be. In the consideration stage, what problems can you solve for your prospects? That's where you need to be focused. On the purchase side, that's when you start talking about your unique value proposition and how you can solve it better or more efficiently than anyone else. In the retention stage, you're going to be talking about how you are providing consistent and constant value. You're also going to remember that once somebody buys from you, they're going to almost immediately have buyer's remorse. So the more you can keep them engaged and happy, the longer term client they're going to be, which is going to save you money in the long run. Finally, advocacy. How can you get a customer of yours to tell other people about you? How can you get them to recommend your solution to others? And how can you help advance that by providing them a sounding board and a platform in order to do that? That's kind of how this breaks down into content choices for the buyer's journey. Next week, Dave is going to be talking a lot about the intake points in your digital strategy and how best to do that so that you can create a really great reciprocity that we're talking about here today in the buyer's journey. As I leave you today, I want to give you a couple of things to think about. Focus on activity that gets results. So I've demonstrated a good 15 or 16 different tools that you could potentially choose from. That doesn't mean you need to utilize all of them. What you need to do is try as many as you can and focus on the ones that actually provide you the real tangible results that are meaningful to you. They might not be meaningful to everybody else, but they are going to be meaningful to you. That's where I want you to spend your time and spend your energy after you've created your persona and after you've mapped out your buyer's journey. Next, measure, track results, and show ROI. The key thing there is ROI, the fancy way of saying return on investment. Do the things that are actually creating real physical responses for you and getting you a real tangible result. Not just more activity, not just more website views. How are you moving the sales needle? Those are the activities that you need to be focused on. How do you know which are the right ones to do? You do that by measuring, tracking your results, establishing a baseline, and understanding where are you growing from there, and is that growth sufficient, and is that growth moving the needle? So next up is creating landing pages and forms next week. That is a truly critical part of the buyer's journey. It's where you're asking for a little bit of information in exchange for a little bit of information. And there's a lot of really good best practices to keep in mind. So if you haven't signed up for it, I really encourage you to do so because the next 4 episodes really get into the meat of inbound marketing and how to really execute the strategies we talked about today. Dave will be back next week to talk about it. I'll be back the week following to talk about email. I encourage you to sign up if you haven't already. It's definitely worth the investment. Finally, if you're interested in learning more about BusyWeb or if you'd like to take part in other events like this, we'd be happy to share them with you. The easiest way to start communicating with us is to text the word BUSY, B-I-Z-Z-Y, to 22828, and we'll take you through some strategies to get on our email list. Finally, I wanted to provide my contact information. So if you're interested in talking with me, if you have follow-up questions, feedback, anything like that, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about your buyer's journey and how you are successfully instituting some of the strategies we talked about today. So thanks everybody for joining me. Dave will be back next week in part 3 of our series. We'll see you then.